Roaring out like thunder, I am your barbarian chieftain. Today we're going to be talking about RPG notes, high fantasy, and the current state of high fantasy, the roots of high fantasy. And you want to talk about high fantasy, you want to reinvigorate your high fantasy gaming experience, get Within the Ring of Fire, get your physical copies, hardback, softback, and PDF combinations on Drive-Thru-RPG, Within the Ring of Fire, Drive-Thru-RPG. Get your fantasy gaming on like never before. Until the end of January, we're going to be running a special deal, only $75 on Within the Ring of Fire. PDFs, you get every PDF ever put out for Within the Ring of Fire, only $75. Hit your main man up on Facebook. Take advantage of that deal. We're extending it from Christmas. Loads of people have stepped into the flames, and you'll get the opportunity to introduce your group to the dirtiest, darkest fantasy game out there with the most interesting, invigorating, high fantasy feel and a seamless, sensical fashion of assembling these strange facets. Hit me up on Facebook, $75. First 4 PDFs out. 5th one should be out by the end of January. 2 more in the works. More coming. The deal of your RPG lifetime. Now, when we talk about high fantasy, we're going to go back to Tolkien. We're going to talk about elves, dwarves, halflings, humans, orcs. We're going to talk about wights. We're going to talk about demons. And we're going to talk about shadowy creatures, giants, ents, all these sort of things that are really culled into the base foundation. And that Tolkien itself was the base foundation of Dungeons and Dragons. We can clearly see that simply by examining the player character options. The player character options themselves are not lizard man, pixie, giant, hobgoblin, and death-dealing undead creature. Those aren't the options. They are Tolkien's options and gnomes. That's it. It's exactly based off that. We see all the Tolkienist stuff in there. We have the tree ent. We have, the giants, the barrel wights are in there. The Balrog, Balor, you understand? All this stuff's in there. And it really formed the foundation with fantasy works culled from a lot of other people, and likely a few vaguely original ideas in there. Though I'm not quite sure if, in all honesty, not to even be joking on it, but I don't know. Are there any? But anyway, when we look at that in fantasy sections, you can go through a fantasy section to see high fantasy, and it's just such derivative dribble. It's like, oh, and here's another book about dwarves, and here's a video game about dwarves, and here's more stuff about dwarves and elves, and these dwarves and elves act just like Tolkien dwarves and elves, except maybe we changed one minor thing. And like, oh my god, one minor thing, and your mind is blown because there's so much repetitive stockness to it. When people start playing with those elements, even a little bit, they start to reinvigorate you, because quite frankly, the same thing over and over again, that same old song, can get very, very downright boring. Now, in your Dungeons & Dragons world, we see some distinction. It's generally, an elf in Dragonlance is a little different than an elf in Forgotten Realms, but only a little. The wizard in Dragonlance is a little different than the wizard in Forgotten Realms, but only a little. You have kinders instead of halflings. You have dwarves that are filthy, loathsome, gully dwarves, as well as other dwarves. And the dwarves themselves, they're pretty much the same. There may be some statistical differences, but it's essentially the same thing. And maybe you have a minotaur or something, and you make some minor differences, but in your Dragonlance, in your Forgotten Realms, in your Ravenloft, and a lot of these games, you have a very similar position for high fantasy. And as an RPG writer and creator, when I looked at high fantasy, I said, you can't just do the same thing. You need to have some focal points of similarity. You need to use some of the same old names, so people go, oh, well, yeah, that's different. Oh, that's interesting. And maybe change a few things, but names, and keep certain things a little degree of similarity, so you don't have a complete 180 that can quite honestly confuse people. When people get confused, they don't like things because it makes them feel dumb. So you want to have people in a situation where they're like, there's enough there to grab them, to have enough commonality when they start looking, and then then you can start filling in the spectrum beyond that with strange bizarreness. If we look back to the first Star Wars movie that was just called Star Wars, I believe, before they made 30 sequels, there's one of the most famous scenes in cinema, the canteen scene, and you just look around and you see all these aliens, and it's fantastic. I mean, it's an absolutely fantastic scene because it's like, what kind of alien is he? What kind of world is he from? What does he do? Why does he have that look to him? And the scene worked spectacularly well, and it's probably the best scene in any sort of science fiction anything. It's probably the singular best scene because it leaves you with wonder. It leaves you with wanting more instead of being overwhelmed. Or, you know, and these species can all get along to some limited degree. There might be problems there. You're like, oh, that's a Rhodian. Oh, that's a Transdoshan. Oh, I mean, whatever. To any of those sort of Star Wars scenes. And Star Wars itself is definitely high fantasy with, guns and spaceships. A lightsaber is a straight up high fantasy weapon. The Force is high fantasy. You have all these different races, species that come from all these different worlds, and it's just so evocative and provoking of the mind and how they interplay into this galactic setting, which itself is, wonderful. And some of the things aren't even like, really all that anthropomorphic, like a hut. Like, oh, what's going on with this guy? Or Jabba's, the scenes in Jabba's palace, we're looking around the same thing. Oh, what's that? What's that? What's that? And they made figures of all of them. And you have people that are just they love it so much they just transfixed to buy and look at all these figures, set up scenes with toys and just look at them because it captured their mind so thoroughly. Such an interesting thing. And I think that looking at that sort of scene is a wonderful success. Because again, it's mostly these anthropomorphic creatures. You had I don't know what all their actual names are now, but you had Walrus Man, and you had like Hammerhead. What is he? An Icthorian? I probably mispronounced that. All I know about Star Wars really is from the role playing games. But you have these things that are kind of human, and even with an Icthorian, it's still kind of human. You could certainly drop that in a Dungeons and Dragons game as a something to play. Oh, here you go, or you see that, and the problem with Dungeons and Dragons, the ecology is built towards this ecology of Elfdorf human, Elfdorf human, Elfdorf human, and we can tolerate halflings and gnomes because come on, they're not a threat. And half orcs, that's a problem. And they might even be like, oh, half elves, I don't know about you, I'm gonna go Irish style on you, half elf. So that can be can really stagnate. Like, oh, we don't, goblins, lizard man, hobgoblins. No, but when you get into an idea fresh, knock it all off the table and begin to add cultures. And okay, how does this culture interface with this culture? How do they interface with them? What are their needs? They're like, okay, well, we're locked here and we can't really get to the ocean. So pearls and fish and all this stuff is really, well, that's really valuable to us. We really like that. We're happy to trade for that. You might be very hard for them even to try to raid to acquire these things. So they want them, and they're willing to trade, and trade is a great thing that makes peace. I need what you have. I can pay a very high price and keep attacking you for it, or maybe we can work something out because I have this iron ore, and I have this copper, and I have things that you want. I have timber, and you start building that, so then you can introduce your various things in there. The rinse, wash, repeat token S setting, which you see in so many homebrew games. Because often, like a Dungeons & Dragons, doesn't really teach you how to step-by-step create a, let's call it campaign world. It teaches you how to set traps and how to calculate experience from random encounters and how to roll random encounters and things that, quite frankly, do not help you at all. It's how to run a battle map, because that's important, because that'll sell more miniatures for them. But when you learn the incorporation of these alien sort of entities, these additional mindsets, your original fantastic creations, you incorporate their ecology, their economy. How do they play out on a global scale? How do they play out on a local scale? Who are they allied with? Who are their enemies? And you can make some very surprising, interesting things when you do it like that. And you can see in Icavega Thale, you're able to work in most of the species, not with every other species, but so many of them can be playable. A Typhon, I don't know. I guess you'd say the closest analog you would have in Dungeons and Dragons. Like your serpent people, or like in a Lovecraft game, or your what are they called? But they're well not well. They're very not like Typhon though. They Yanti, the fucking serpent people, are essentially almost like unplayable. I've never seen someone play one of those. But anyway, ecology wise, they fill a completely different niche than say a Typhon would. And you make the Typhon necessary. It's like, oh, that's fucking Typhon over there. All right, X, Y, and Z regions is your problem, but he has some things I might want. He has some use to me. He can provide pleasures in all sorts of different ways. He can help you out. He's gonna smile. He's gonna be nice. He's gonna be polite. He might remember you. He might stroke your self-esteem just a little bit, and you might go, I hear all these bad things about Typhon, but it's not so terrible. It's not so bad, is he? But you build them towards redeemable, and that's a very important thing if you want to have a world where it's not that's a bad guy, kill it and take its experience points, right? Because I know in real life we all run out to do that. That's how we level up. Kill squirrels and stuff. I guess I don't know. That idea is mind-numbingly stupid. But when you have these cultures, right? You build those strange cultures, and how do they interact? You're like, well, that might be a scumbag over there, but these things make you more sympathetic. These things I can relate to. These things are okay, and you can start building those things together and building games that work from a foundation basis. Not all right. Well, you all meet in a tavern, and the reason you all meet in a tavern is because people make ridiculous things that can't work together, and a game master is not taught how to actually run a game. You will if you read the first chapter of the Saga Book of Within Ring of Fire. Everything we'll ever need to know on the basics of running a game, basics of playing RPGs, the basics of succeeding, and the basics of mastering right in there in that first chapter. And that's very important because you need that foundation. How do we tell a game of political intrigue? How do we play a game of building a city-state? How do we play a game of building a monastery or of political infighting between noble houses or individuals trying to rise, to climb a ladder, or the politics of a various city, or the archaeological team, a group of individuals that are transporting goods across a shipping lane, as opposed to simply well, let's all just wander down that trail and find goblins and kill them. Let's go find a few weeks later gnolls and kill them. There's problems. There's lots of problems there, and it can lead to a less satisfying thing because it doesn't come from a conceptual standpoint of really encouraging the characters to go along with it. But I find again that's your play point is making these things breathe, because quite frankly I have no desire to play a token-esque game. There are so many of them out there, and they are so boring at this point. I'm an elf, and elves act like this. I'm a dwarf, and dwarves act like this. I'm a halfling, and I suck. Ah! I'm a gnome, dummy, and I live in your front lawn. That's what I do, dummy. I have a +5 bonus for living in your front yard. I have a red hat on, dummy. So, when you have those games that are essentially cliche stereotypes, it produces a less interesting game. When you open up and reinvigorate that genre of high fantasy, and you can get within the Ring of Fire and see just how to reinvigorate your player's mind. That's a comment I get over and over again. Whoa, this is different. I read it. It's sinking in. A couple days later, I understand. Here's a couple questions. I'm bringing my players in. We're running the game. A week later, oh my God, this is amazing. This is different. This is not the same old song. This is an entirely unique vision and version. And I think that you really get a lot of pop out of that when you give them different options. When you give them a very different experience, role-playing game-wise, to shake the dust off that fantasy genre. A lot of people give up on the fantasy genre because they go, well, Warhammer, Dungeons and Dragons, Palladium of Fantasy, Savage Worlds fantasy games, Rune Quest. There's just these games are so similar, and that's how I hear that kind of thing. This is dead, dull fantasy genre. It's the same thing played over and over again, and you don't go, oh, there's this difference. There's some, for sure, but a lot of the similarities are really, really overwhelming. And when you don't, when you go out of your way to try to create something different. If you make your own home-based game, don't look and go, oh, how many elves, dwarves, and halflings, and take them there. No, there's no gnomes in my world. No, I don't think so. An enormous giant called My Main Man came and stomped all the gnomes and kicked all the halflings into the ocean, and that myth has transpired. He lives on top of that mountain. If you want to get lariated, go up there and talk to him about it. But for fantasy games, I think that is going to continuously be the future progressing model. I don't think people really like that. It's a comfort zone thing. People go, oh, Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder, because that's just a ripoff of Dungeons and Dragons with bad rules. And I said it. Where you're going to be pulling people into that same familiar comfort zone, and I think that is really the problem. Laziness, indolence on a lot of players, and building that comfort zone, and then being afraid, cowardism, to come past that and to say, well, yeah, I did that, I liked it, but I was scared. And I hear it from people all the time. Don't get mad because I keeps it real, I shoots. But I mean, that's the real deal. Push yourself past it, and you're gonna get better. You're going to see that you can handle it, that you're smart enough, that you're quick enough, that you're will build comfortableness with just really whatever you're doing. Try to run different things, try to get a better sense, and your group is going to become healthier. Your players are going to be happier. They're going to be more enthused when the more options you have. And certainly in the fantasy world, you can create. It's fantasy. You can create anything. Don't just go, oh, elves and hobbits. Yay. Add new original ideas. Shoot for the vistas and plateaus of imagination. And, the higher up you shoot, the higher up you're going to succeed, man. If you shoot way up here, you might come here, but it's higher than here, isn't it? And you keep getting better, you keep getting more confidence, you keep getting wiser in what you're doing, better, and you start achieving more and more interesting results. So don't constrain yourself, and don't force and foster one kind of mentality. Experiment, experience with the different styles, with the different aspects, with the different potential possibility in a fantasy world. And there's really tons of real interesting things you can do fantasy world wise. In the upcoming Air book, I'm probably going to have a number of Kickstarter ideas on building these fantasy worlds. And as far as, okay, here is something new, something different. I've developed up this way. Here are some things that are there. Here's things to play, which we'll detail later in the chapters. Go out there and do it. Go out there and succeed. Go out there and flesh it out, and then seeing what what you guys really like. To continue on from there, and well, anyway, my mad barbaric ramblings come to an end. Hopefully, you found some value and interest to the video, and let me know what you think down in the comments below. Remember to join the Raw Immersive Games on Facebook. Get your copies of Within the Ring of Fire PDFs, blowout sale until the end of January. $75 every PDF ever released for Within the Ring of Fire. Do yourself the biggest favor of your life and burn your mind, Morgul style. Order your copies of Within the Ring of Fire today. Hit your main man on Facebook and get the deal done, baby.